And what they've done is they put the concrete down, and there is no water barrier between the earth and the concrete wall of the basement. Same thing with the foundation. There's no water barrier. And so when you water your yard where there's heavy rains or things like this, the moisture just actually intrudes and goes right through the foundation and into the basement or underneath the house, and therefore then the moisture wicks up through the home and creates an increase in humidity. And all of that increase in humidity, anything above 60%, is going to lead to growth of mold and bacteria. And so it's construction, and people have to be very careful about this situation. I don't know what, and that's the reason why I call it a pandemic.
Mm-hmm. So it's at least 25% of the homes as a sort of a base, but more likely closer to a third and perhaps even higher.
Perhaps even higher, depending on where you are in the country. If you take the southeast part of the United States, that is normally very damp and very humid and very wet, the numbers would probably be much higher in Florida and Georgia and Tennessee. You name that part of the country versus Southern California, where it's fairly arid.
Or Arizona, sure. That would make sense. So I just wanted to highlight some of the points that you mentioned, because one of the reasons that I became interested in this is that I live in a home that was affected by mold, and my last home was too. And I live in the Chicago area, so it's common for these homes here to have basements, where in other areas of the country it's not so common. And what seems in both my homes, interestingly, and I imagine it's a common issue, which is why I want to mention it, and it would probably help many people listening to this, is that you have to be really careful about the drainage of the water from the roof. And typically, my first home, we had obviously have gutters, but I didn't realize that one of the gutters that was draining into the ground directly next to one of the walls was broken, and all the water was going straight next to the basement. And even though the initial thought is that your foundation is a crack in it, and you've got to go out and get these companies to come in and seal the cracks so that the water doesn't leak in. But actually, it may not be that at all. It may just be that the downspout is not allowing the water to be removed from the roof and far enough away from the building so that it doesn't come back into the house. So that was one issue. And the current home I live in, it actually had a drain pipe that was perforated. So all the water was being deposited right next to the foundation wall and started a problem. So we changed that to a solid pipe, and it worked out well. But also another point is that over time, the soil next to the house tends to slope down towards the house. Which provides a tremendous opportunity for the water to go right to the foundation wall. So what frequently needs to be done, and in our house we actually had to build a whole new retaining wall to do this, is to slope the dirt the other way, to build it back up and have it slope away, and make sure it's down far enough so that these seepage holes that are typically there at the top of the foundation are open, and the water can evaporate and escape.
Yeah, that's very true. It's also the landscaping. If you look at the homes that are built today, and let's say they have a yard with sprinkler systems.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what they've done is they've put the foundation below ground, correct?
That's correct.
Alrighty. Then they put in the sprinkler systems, and quite often I can be driving down the road here in Southern California. Look out, the sprinklers are actually spraying on the side of the building rather than away from the building.
Yeah.
And number two is now you've got the slope towards the foundation of the home. But where's the water going to go?
Absolutely.
Towards the home, right.
Yeah.
The thing that I've also seen, and this is throughout the country, is that when they put slabs down, particularly in areas where the groundwater is pretty elevated, 2, 3, and 4 feet, they are not protecting the slabs from the groundwater, so you need to put a good thick barrier underneath the slab.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a condominium complex here in Sacramento area that's built on top of groundwater. The groundwater is approximately 3 feet. So in the spring, what happens is with runoff off the mountains from Lake Tahoe and all the rains that we have, that groundwater comes up, hits that slab, and then the moisture just goes right into the building.
Yeah, so there's not much that a current homeowner could do with that situation, because they'd have to destroy the whole house to put something under that slab. But for
Well, right now we're just trying to experiment on one of the units. We're trying to seal these slabs to see if we can prevent from the moisture from coming in, but I don't think we're going to be able to.
Yeah, so it's really more for the new homeowner who's which aren't too many people nowadays with the economy that is starting to build a new home. But for virtually everyone else, just like in most any area of life, the best way to treat something is to prevent it, because once you actually have the problem, it becomes so much more difficult to take care of. So there's really three simple preventive measures that I encourage everyone to as soon as you can address these, and that is to make sure that the water coming off of your roofing and going into your gutters is being drained away at least 5 to 10 foot away from any wall. Look, and if you have sprinkler systems installed, make sure it's not spraying on the walls of your home, because that's the last thing you want to do is throw additional water on there. And then look at the slope of your landscaping. The slope has to be away, so it goes down, not the higher point should be against the foundation and slope down from there. So you don't want the water going away from the home. It's key things, because we'll talk about remediation in a bit if you got a problem, but clearly the number one way to treat a mold issue is to make sure the water is not coming into the house.
Yeah, I agree with you. The first step is prevention.
Yeah.
Prevent the water from intruding, then you probably will not have a serious problem. But let's go back to the construction. I've seen homes where, today they're using, instead of using copper and galvanized piping, they're using polyethylene PVC type piping. I've seen where they're actually punctured with nails, and they use these damn air guns, right?
Sure.
Staples. So they're punctured. I've seen where they're punctured the actual PVC polyvinyl piping, go off and leave it during construction, and then now the people move in, turn on the water, and guess what happens?
Yeah, then you got a nightmare you have to fix.
That's right. I've also seen, for example, bathtubs that are put down with the improper sealing around the drain, and the water go underneath the bathtub, out into the flooring around in the bathroom. So you have to look at the various types of construction defects that are going on too.
Sure. Yeah, I would imagine another common area is in the kitchen sink. You've got your garbage disposal typically, and a lot of pipes in there, and it's
right.
Or even the bathroom sinks. You really have to check those regularly to make sure there's not a leak that's developed. Because if there is, typically those water pipes are sitting over a fiberboard, and that is a perfect growth media for mold. If you get water and you get some mold spores in the air, which almost every home has some spores, it's going to start growing colonies.
Yeah, right. Well, the other thing too is I've seen construction sites where they bring in this wafer board, they call it, or its board is glued together, similar to particle board that has the
sure.
in it, and particle board. I've seen where they've brought that material in, set it on a building site, and allow it to be rained on, then turn around and construct the homes with that material, and that material is never dried out. And then they cover it over with stucco or something on the outside, and guess what happened?
Boy.
You get tremendous growth going on in that material, because that type of construction material has a lot of organic materials in it that mold and bacteria love. And one thing I want to talk about, Dr. Mercola, too, is the bacteria. I think this is an issue that's being overlooked. Okay?
Sure. Why don't you help educate us about that?
Okay, well, in these homes that grow right along with the mold are what we call gram-negative and gram-positive bacteria. Now, the gram-negative bacteria, I think we're all familiar with, are potential human pathogens as a rule. They can cause an infection. A good example would be E. coli and Pseudomonas and Proteus. They love to grow in these type of environments. They grow right along with the bacteria. Now, the gram-positive are a group of bacteria that are being totally overlooked. And this positive bacteria consists of several bacilli, cocci, and one group called the actinomycetes. Now, the actinomycetes contain several different groups of bacteria, like Mycobacterium. We're all familiar with that over the many years with Mycobacterium tuberculosis.
Sure.
Right? There are 139 other species of Mycobacterium that can grow in our environment, and 11 to 12 of those in the indoor environment are very serious human pathogens and can cause a condition called Mycobacterium avium complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen individuals diagnosed with this from the indoor environment. The American Thoracic Society in 2007 did a tremendous review on Mycobacterium avium complex, and this is a very dangerous situation. It causes serious infection of the lungs and can spread throughout the body, and many of the symptoms are those of hypersensitivity pneumonitis. The condition go on and develop into an asthma-like condition, and then also into sarcoidosis, particularly of the mediastinum.
Sure.
Okay, and then the other group are the streptomyces.
Mm-hmm.
And the streptomyces, you ever hear of an antibiotic called streptomycin?
Oh, sure. I think it's still being
used. That's where the streptomyces give rise to a lot of antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
Also, streptomyces are a source of many of the chemotherapeutic agents that are used today. Now, these organisms are growing in the indoor environment. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing is the gram-negative bacteria produce, when they die, they release their cell walls. We refer to these as lipopolysaccharides. The other common term are endotoxin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the endotoxins that they release can tremendously exacerbate asthma. It is, very inflammatory. There is even current research that indicates that the inflammation can get so great that it can also affect the brain and other organs of the body. So all of these chemicals are interacting. It's like we have the soup that we're living in these indoor environments. And then on top of it, all these microorganisms, the bacteria and the fungi, produce what we call volatile organic chemicals that add to the environment.
Now, how often do you find these bacterial infections with respect to mold infections? Is it most of the time, some of the time?
I think that they're present, but they're being overlooked. I don't do the diagnostics on these patients. I generally work with the physicians. We're finding that, I don't know the percentage, but several of the people will actually find the bacterial infection going on. I can recommend that they take nasal secretions. What I recommend they do, rather than doing a nasal wash, is a person gets up early in the morning and evacuates their nose into a sputum cup and is send it off and look for both bacteria and mold. And invariably, we find both. Okay. The most common one I've seen are Acinetobacter and Pseudomonas. Sometimes I'll find Proteus. But the percentage I don't know, okay, because I work in individual cases rather than a population.
Are you able to culture these out of the home too, where you're finding the sources where the mold's growing?
Yeah, invariably that's what I do. I do both fungal and bacterial cultures. They are present, yes.
Interesting. And I would assume it's the same risk factors for the growth. In other words, they require the moisture and organic material to grow, which is...
That is right. And then I don't know, they grow right along with the mold in the same situation. And there have been studies that show that the bacterial products of the mold are synergistic with the mold and creating increased inflammatory conditions of both. These are animal studies, not humans. Inflammatory condition created by the mycotoxins as well as by, let's say, the endotoxin. So there's a synergism going on.
Interesting.
And how this is affecting the human population, no one is looking at this issue. The defense is trying to ignore it. And when I say defense, the other side, you follow. The doctors are not trained to understand what's going on. And then there are a group of doctors who just take statements that are saying that mold can only cause allergies, and